The moment I heard the sirens, my stomach dropped. Within seconds, 2 police cruisers came flying down my streetlights, flashing like a full-blown crime scene. I was standing in my own driveway, hands slightly raised, phone, still recording, while Valerie Monroe, our notorious HOA president in her bright pink blazer, was screaming at the officers. "That's him! Arrest him! He threatened me!" Behind me, my Lamborghini Urus gleamed in the sunlight, perfect, flawless, and apparently worth calling 911 over. 30 minutes earlier, I'd been enjoying a quiet Saturday morning polishing my dream car. Now I was being treated like a criminal because I refused to sell it for $1. The neighborhood watched from their windows. Valerie shouted. The officers moved in, and I realized this wasn't just about a car. This was about power, ego, and how far one HOA Karen would go to get her way. Before we jump into what really happened that day, comment your city and local time below. I love knowing where everyone's tuning in from, and if you enjoy wild HOA drama and revenge stories, don't forget to subscribe. Trust me, this one's worth it. It all began on what should have been a perfect Saturday morning. The kind of morning where the sun hits just right, the air smells clean after a night of mountain rain, and the world feels calm enough for you to believe people are generally reasonable. I had my music playing low, a microfiber towel in hand, and a bottle of ceramic detailer ready. My Lamborghini Urus metallic gold mirror, polished to perfection, sat in the driveway like a piece of art. It was my peace, my therapy, my reward, after 15 years of building my cybersecurity company from nothing. Then I heard the one sound that always ruins my peace, the sharp-clipped voice of Valerie Monroe, the president of the Lakeside Meadows HOA. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," she called out, her tone fake sweet in that way only HOA presidents can manage. I looked up from my wheel rim and immediately felt a headache coming on. Valerie stood at the end of my driveway in her bright pink blazer, clipboard in hand, and oversized sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Beside her was her son Brandon, a bored-looking 19-year-old who was glued to his phone. "Morning, Valerie," I said cautiously, straightening up. "Something wrong?" "Oh, no," she said, stepping closer. "I was just taking a walk with Brandon. He's been absolutely obsessed with your car." She gave the Urus an exaggerated once-over. "It's flashy." "Thank you," I said, simply already sensing the direction this was heading. Brandon finally looked up from his phone. "Mom, that's the one I was telling you about, the twin-turbo V8. Valerie smiled thinly. "Yes, honey, I know." Then to me, his birthday's next month, and I promised him something special. "So tell me, Ethan, what's your asking price?" I blinked, half laughing because I thought she was joking. "It's not for sale." She didn't laugh. Instead, she pulled out a fancy checkbook. "Of course, everything's for sale for the right price. $20,000, cash." My laugh died instantly. "Ma'am, this car costs nearly $300,000 before customization." She waved a dismissive hand, as if I'd just told her the price of a cup of coffee. "Yes, but it's used." "You've had it what, 6 months?" "I think 25 is generous." "Generous," I repeated, incredulous. Her eyes narrowed and her tone hardened. "Everything depreciates, Mr. Cole. Even Lamborghinis." I set the towel down slowly, trying to stay calm. "It's not for sale at any price." For a second, she just stared at me. Then she smirked. "Well, you'll change your mind. Everyone has a price." I thought that was the end of it. I really did. But she took another step forward, completely ignoring my personal space. "Look, I understand. You're attached. But let's be reasonable. 30,000. Final offer." "Valerie," I said firmly, "the car isn't on the market. Please step back from my driveway." That was when she reached into her purse and pulled out a single dollar bill. Crisp, unfolded like it had been waiting there just for this moment. $1, she said proudly. "It's symbolic. You sell it for $1 as a good deed. Karma will reward you tenfold." I just stared at her, stunned. "You're serious?" She nodded, completely confident. I took a deep breath, trying to process the absurdity. "I'm not selling you my car for $1. Or for any amount. Please leave." She gave me a smile that could curdle milk. "You might want to reconsider, Mr. Cole. That vehicle violates our HOA aesthetic regulations. Excessive gloss finish, non-neutral color, potentially disruptive exhaust noise." "Valerie," I interrupted, "there's nothing in the CC&Rs about car color or gloss." "Oh, I'm sure we can find something," she said coldly, flipping through her clipboard. "If we can't, we'll make an amendment." That was when I pulled out my phone and started recording. I didn't raise my voice, didn't step closer, just calmly said, "I'm asking you to leave my property. You're trespassing." Her eyes flicked to my phone, then back to me. "Oh, you want to play that game," she hissed. Brandon tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, maybe we should quiet Brandon," she snapped. Then, before I could react, she reached out and yanked the handle of my car door. The click of the locked handle echoed like a gunshot in the quiet morning. "Step away from my car," I said evenly. She turned face flushed. "You can't tell me what to do. You think you're above the rules. I'll show you how this community handles arrogance." Then she did the unthinkable. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. I could hear the dispatcher's voice faintly. 911, what's your emergency?" Her voice instantly changed, soft, trembling, theatrical. "Yes, I'm at 214 Maple Crest Drive. There's a man threatening me. He won't let me leave. He's yelling and becoming aggressive." I stood there, jaw slack, recording everything. "You've got to be kidding me." She looked me dead in the eye and whispered, "You should have just taken the dollar." Within 5 minutes, the sound of sirens filled the neighborhood. Doors opened, curtains twitched, people came out to watch. I stayed where I was, hands visible, phone still recording. 2 police cruisers pulled up, tires screeching, and 4 officers stepped out, hands hovering near their holsters. Valerie immediately pointed at me, voice shaking like she was auditioning for a soap opera. "That's him. He threatened me. He's dangerous." "Sir, keep your hands where we can see them," one officer commanded. I did exactly that. "Officers, I'm the homeowner. I have everything on video." She trespassed and attempted to open my vehicle. My neighbor, Dr. Lucas Park, jogged over from across the street holding up his own phone. "I've been filming too. He didn't do anything." "She's lying." Valerie spun on him. "You're taking his side. You don't even know what happened." "Actually," Lucas said calmly, "I saw the whole thing. The officers split us apart. One questioned me, another spoke with Valerie. It didn't take long before they watched the video on my phone. Her voice clear as day, claiming she'd call the police because I refused to sell her my car. The moment she pulled the handle, the threats about HOA rules, the lead officer, Sergeant Whitaker, sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Ma'am," he said to Valerie, "from what I'm seeing, this man didn't threaten you. You entered his property without permission." Valerie's eyes went wide. "You're taking his side. Do you know who I am?" "Yes, ma'am," Whitaker said evenly, "and you're about to be charged with filing a false police report and trespassing." Her face turned scarlet. "This is ridiculous," Brandon told them, but Brandon looked away, clearly mortified. "Mom, please stop." Then, in one last desperate act, she grabbed a small decorative rock from my garden and lunged toward the Urus. "If I can't have it, no one will, ma'am. Put it down," shouted Officer Ruiz. But she didn't. Ruiz tackled her before she could lift her arm, the rock, clattering harmlessly onto the driveway. Valerie screamed every curse word in the book as the officers handcuffed her and read her rights. When they finally put her in the cruiser, the entire neighborhood stood in stunned silence. Sergeant Whitaker approached me. "Mr. Cole, we'll need you to come down to the station later to give a statement." "Of course, officer," I said, quietly, glancing at my car, completely unharmed, still gleaming under the Sunday. Whitaker gave me a sympathetic smile. "I've been doing this for 15 years, he said. "Never thought I'd see someone call 911 over a Lamborghini and a dollar bill. Neither did I. But little did I know that 911 call would become the spark that exposed far more than one woman's obsession. It would unravel corruption, arrogance, and the dark side of HOA power itself. And I was just getting started." The rest of that Saturday unfolded like something out of a bad reality show. The moment the police cars left, with Valerie still screaming about unlawful arrest from the back seat, half the neighborhood was standing on their lawns, whispering, pretending not to stare. My driveway looked like a movie set that had just wrapped a chaos scene, shoe prints on the concrete, yellow tape fluttering by the curb, and my golden Lamborghini Urus still shining like nothing had happened. I remember standing there, hands on my hips, just exhaling. My neighbor, Dr. Lucas Park, walked over, still holding his phone. "You all right, Ethan?" he asked. "Define all right," I said dryly. He chuckled. "I've got the whole thing on video. She's finished." I appreciated it, but part of me knew Valerie Monroe wasn't the type to give up easily. You don't become HOA president by being reasonable. You do it by being persistent, manipulative, and utterly convinced that you are the law. By noon, my phone was buzzing non-stop. The HOA group chat was blowing up, dozens of residents posting blurry photos and half-baked theories. Some defended Valerie, others were furious. One message read, "I heard Ethan assaulted her." Another said police confirmed she made it up. I turned my phone off. That night, I sat in my living room, still processing everything, when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sergeant Whitaker standing there, looking tired but calm. "Evening, Mr. Cole," he said. "Just wanted to update you. Please tell me she's not out already." He sighed. "She made bail." But don't worry, she's facing charges for filing a false report trespassing and attempted property damage. We've got your video, and Dr. Park's footage lines up perfectly. I nodded, trying to stay composed. What happens now? She'll probably lawyer up. Expect some noise from her end. Just stay smart, keep your security cameras running, and don't engage if she tries to contact you. I couldn't help but laugh under my breath. You know, she's the HOA president, right? He grimaced. Then you might want to brace yourself. Those people love paperwork more than justice. He wasn't wrong. By Monday morning, an official-looking envelope was taped to my front door. It had the HOA seal on it, Lakeside Meadows Homeowners Association Board of Directors. I didn't even have to open it to know what it was. Retaliation. Inside was a notice of violation. Dear Mr. Cole, it has come to the board's attention that your vehicle, a Lamborghini Urus Gold finish, may be in violation of the HOA's aesthetic and community harmony standards. Specifically, excessive glare and non-neutral color scheme, noise disturbance due to repeated engine revving, public nuisance resulting from police activity at your residence. At the bottom was Valerie's signature, signed 2 days before her arrest. I laughed out loud. The audacity was unreal. She had actually predated the violation notice, like she was preparing for the war she started. That afternoon, I drove straight to the county records office, made copies of every HOA bylaw, and highlighted every section about vehicle, aesthetics, and nuisance violations. As expected, none of it applied. Not a single word about paint color or noise limits for vehicles, only for lawn equipment and outdoor parties after 10 p.m. So I drafted a formal appeal and sent it certified mail to the HOA board copy to the HOA's law firm copy to my own attorney. Then I went one step further. I created a private Facebook group called Lakeside Transparency. Within hours, half the neighborhood joined. I uploaded my video of Valerie's meltdown and the 911 call footage the police had released. I wrote a single caption: if you've ever been bullied by the HOA, it's time to talk. By the end of the night, I had 67 comments and 22 new messages in my inbox, stories of petty fines, intimidation, and made-up violations. Valerie's little empire was starting to crack. 2 days later, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. Mr. Cole, a stern voice said. This is Greg Monroe, Valerie's husband. I didn't respond. I want to discuss what happened, he continued. We can resolve this quietly. No need to drag this through court or social media. Your wife called the police on me because I wouldn't sell her my car for $1, I said flatly. Then she tried to vandalize it. She's under stress, Greg said quickly. She wasn't herself. You provoked her. I pressed record on my phone. That's not how it looked on camera. A long pause. Then, in a colder tone, if you don't take down those videos, I'll make sure the HOA hits you with every fine in the book. Go ahead, I said. I already have the book. And I hung up. By Thursday, the story had gone beyond the neighborhood. Someone from the Facebook group had uploaded the video to Reddit r divided by HOA hell, and it exploded overnight. The title read, HOA Karen calls 911 over $1 300 Kelvin's Lamborghini she wanted for $1. 500,000 views in 24 hours. The local news station even contacted me for comment. I declined, but they ran the story anyway. Valerie's mugshot, hair messy, blazer grass stained was now public record. The HOA tried to hold an emergency meeting that Friday. According to the bylaws, any resident could attend. So I did. When I walked into the community center, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. About 40 homeowners were there, some whispering, some glaring. Valerie's chair at the head of the table was empty, but her husband Greg was sitting in her place looking smug and defensive. Mr. Cole, he said, forcing a smile. We weren't expecting you. You called a public meeting, I said. I'm a resident. He straightened. We're here to address the recent incident. Which part, I asked. The false police report, the trespassing, or the fake violation notice she signed before getting arrested. Murmurs rippled through the room. Greg's jaw tightened. Watch your tone, he snapped. The HOA has authority to impose sanctions. And homeowners have the right to remove board members who abuse that authority. I shot back, holding up a printed copy of the bylaws. Section 4.7, Special Recall Meeting. With signatures from 25% of the residents, we can vote to remove any officer of the HOA. That got their attention. Several neighbors nodded. One even whispered, I'll sign. Greg's face went pale. You don't understand what you're starting, Cole. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said. I'm starting accountability. I walked out of that meeting to applause. By the next week, the recall petition had over 80 signatures, more than double what was needed. The HOA board scheduled a vote for the following month, but Valerie never made it that far. She formally resigned the next day through her attorney, citing emotional distress and personal safety concerns. When I read her resignation email, I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief. The neighborhood was finally breathing again. People waved when they saw me instead of avoiding eye contact. Brandon even stopped by one afternoon to apologize. He looked embarrassed older somehow. "I'm sorry about my mom," he said quietly. "She gets intense." "It's not your fault," I said. "Just promise me one thing." He looked up. "When you turn 20, don't buy an HOA house." He laughed, a genuine laugh, and nodded. Still, part of me knew the story wasn't over. A few days later, I received a thick envelope from Valerie's lawyer demanding I cease defamatory activity and remove all social media content depicting or describing Miss Monroe. My attorney sent back a 2-word reply, truth defense. 2 weeks later, that same lawyer called to negotiate a settlement. Valerie would pay for my legal fees, the repainting of my driveway where the police tape had left residue, and publicly apologize at the next HOA gathering. I agreed on one condition, that her apology be recorded and shared in the HOA newsletter. When the day came, she stood trembling behind a podium, voice cracking. To my neighbors and to Mr. Cole, I let my position and pride get the better of me. I made false accusations and acted irresponsibly. I'm deeply sorry. The applause that followed wasn't for her, it was for closure. As I stood beside my Lamborghini Urus that evening, watching the sunset reflect off its flawless hood, I realized something simple, yet satisfying. Sometimes revenge doesn't come from anger. It comes from truth exposure and letting someone destroy themselves with their own arrogance. And in Lakeside Meadows, that truth was worth a whole lot more than a single dollar. When Valerie Monroe finally stepped down, Lakeside Meadows felt like a different place overnight. The streets were quieter. The HOA email spam stopped. Neighbors who had barely made eye contact for years were suddenly waving at one another like long-lost friends. It was as if everyone had been holding their breath under her rule, and now, for the first time in years, they could finally exhale. Still, I knew better than to celebrate too soon. Power doesn't disappear in an HOA. It just changes hands. And sure enough, the board announced an emergency election to fill the vacant president's seat. To my surprise and slight horror, someone nominated me. At first, I laughed it off. No chance, I told my neighbor Lucas as we walked around the cul-de-sac that evening. I just wanted to be left alone with my car. I'm not looking to run a homeowner's revolution. He smirked. "Ethan, you're the only one who stood up to Valerie and actually won. People trust you now. They want someone who'll protect them, not fine them for leaving their trash cans out too long." He wasn't wrong. Over the next few days, my inbox flooded with messages from residents thanking me for exposing the madness. They wanted transparency, fairness, and maybe a little common sense. So, reluctantly, I agreed to put my name on the ballot. Election night was chaos in a cardigan. The community center was packed. Retirees, young families, even the dog walkers showed up. Someone brought cupcakes. Someone else made a sign that said, "No more Karens in power, Greg Monroe." Valerie's husband sat in the back row, stone-faced. He still held a board position as treasurer, and I could feel his eyes on me the entire evening. The meeting opened with formalities, but no one cared about the budget or the landscaping report. They were here for one thing, the vote. When my name was called, I gave a short, simple speech. No theatrics, no promises I couldn't keep. "I'm not a politician," I said. "I'm just a guy who wanted to wash his car in peace without being harassed. I believe the HOA should exist to serve homeowners, not intimidate them. If you elect me, I'll make sure this community works the way it was meant to, with respect, transparency, and accountability." It wasn't polished, but it was honest. When the votes were counted, the result wasn't even close. Ethan Cole, 86%. The applause was loud, genuine, and a little overwhelming. Valerie's empty seat at the front of the room suddenly didn't seem so intimidating. As the new president, my first motion was symbolic but important. I proposed the creation of a Transparency and Ethics Committee open to all residents with the power to review any HOA decision before it became official. It passed unanimously. For the first time, people actually smiled at an HOA meeting. But not everyone was happy. 2 weeks into my presidency, I received a notice that my Lamborghini Urus was being reported again for violating the HOA's community harmony guidelines. The complaint, excessive reflection causing driver distraction. The person who filed it, Greg Monroe. I stared at the paper for a long time before laughing out loud. They never learn. Rather than retaliate, I handled it by the book. I called an open board meeting, invited Greg personally, and placed the complaint on the public agenda. When he arrived, he was visibly irritated, tie crooked, carrying a folder thicker than a legal textbook. I started calmly. "Mr. Monroe, thank you for attending. Would you like to explain the basis for your complaint? He cleared his throat. Yes. Multiple residents have expressed concern that Mr. Cole's vehicle produces dangerous glare during daylight hours, creating a traffic hazard. Multiple residents, I asked. Could you name them? He hesitated. They prefer to remain anonymous. Of course they do. Laughter rippled through the room. I continued. Greg, did you personally observe this alleged glare hazard? Well, yes, on several occasions. Interesting, I said, smiling. Because last week, according to the gate logs, you weren't even in the neighborhood between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on the days you filed the reports. The color drained from his face. I projected my phone screen onto the meeting monitor, showing a time-stamped image from my home security cameras, Greg's SUV driving by my house at 8:47 p.m., headlights on long after sunset. So unless the sun now rises at night, I said, I think this complaint might be fabricated. The room broke into murmurs, some outright laughter. Greg clenched his jaw. You can't just I interrupted. As HOA president, I hereby dismiss this violation as baseless and warn you that further false reports will be considered harassment under Section 7.2 of the bylaws. That meeting ended with polite applause and a visible sense of relief. The message was clear, the age of petty power trips was over. Over the next few months, we rebuilt Lakeside Meadows from the inside out. I digitized all HOA records and made them publicly accessible. We rewrote outdated bylaws. We hosted open Q&A nights instead of closed-door votes. Even the fines got fairer, no more $100 penalties for grass 2 inches too long. Residents started volunteering for projects again. Kids rode their bikes without getting scolded. And every Sunday morning when I washed my Lamborghini, someone would always stop to chat, not to complain, but to say hello. The air of fear that had hung over the neighborhood for years had finally lifted. Still, one part of me couldn't fully relax. I knew Greg wasn't done. Sure enough, one evening in early spring, I got a knock on my door. When I opened it, Greg stood there, no tie this time, just a wrinkled polo and an expression somewhere between shame and exhaustion. Ethan, he said quietly. Can we talk? I hesitated, then nodded. Sure. He stepped inside, glancing awkwardly at the Lamborghini through the garage window. I wanted to apologize, he said finally. For Valerie. For everything. I didn't say anything, just listened. She's been in therapy since the court order, he continued. And honestly, she's a different person now. She wanted me to tell you she's sorry, she turned the whole neighborhood against you. I could tell this wasn't easy for him. Whatever his flaws, the man loved his wife and was trying to pick up the pieces. I appreciate that, I said carefully. I don't hold grudges. I just want peace in this community. He nodded slowly. You got that now. Before leaving, he paused at the door. You know, I used to think HOAs kept neighborhoods safe. Now I think they just give the wrong people too much power. I smiled faintly. Depends on who's holding the clipboard. That summer, we hosted our first Lakeside Neighborhood Barbecue, the first community-wide event in years not organized by Valerie's strict committee. Nearly every household showed up. We had kids' games, a grill contest, even a small car show in the cul-de-sac. Naturally, the Lamborghini was the star attraction. People gathered around laughing, taking pictures, asking questions about horsepower and handling. Someone joked that the Urus was now the official mascot of the new HOA. I didn't mind. To me, it wasn't just a car anymore. It was a reminder of everything that had changed and everything that was worth protecting. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the Rockies, I stood with Lucas, watching families dance under the string lights we'd hung across the street. You ever think this place would look like this again? He asked. Not in a million years, I said, sipping my lemonade. He grinned. Guess the HOA finally works for the people, huh? Yeah, I said with a chuckle. For once. We watched the lights reflecting off the Lamborghini's gold surface, warm, steady, and calm. That's when I realized something profound. The Urus had survived. Everything lies, police, power abuse, humiliation, and so had I. But more importantly, the community had survived. We'd gone from fear to fairness, from control to cooperation. And if there's one thing I learned through it all, it's this. Sometimes it takes the loudest engine in the neighborhood to expose the quiet corruption hiding behind the HOA logo. And in my case, justice didn't roar. It purred smooth and golden every time I turned that key. For a few peaceful months, I really thought the storm had passed. The sun rose over Lakeside Meadows each morning, kids played basketball in the cul-de-sac, and nobody was getting fined for unsightly recycling bins. For the first time since I'd moved here, I could enjoy a weekend without a letter from the HOA taped to my door. But calm never lasts long in an HOA. especially when lawyers get involved. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when I came home from work and found a thick envelope sitting neatly on my doorstep. The return address read Monroe and Associates Attorneys at Law. I didn't even have to open it to feel that old familiar irritation creeping up my spine. Inside was a lawsuit. Valerie Monroe, yes, that Valerie was suing me for defamation, emotional distress, and loss of community reputation. According to the paperwork, she claimed my recordings, my social media posts, and my campaign of humiliation had caused her irreparable emotional trauma and cost her future employment opportunities. I laughed out loud. Future employment. In what professional HOA intimidation? But as I flipped through the pages, the humor faded. She was asking for $150 0 damages, and her husband Greg had quietly signed as her co-plaintiff. They were trying to drain me dry legally this time. That night, I called my attorney, Rachel Donovan, a no-nonsense property law specialist who'd helped me during the original 911 debacle. She skimmed the documents and exhaled sharply. Classic slap suit. Slap suit, I asked. Strategic lawsuit against public participation, she explained. It's when someone files a bogus defamation claim to silence criticism. It's not about winning, it's about intimidating you into shutting up. Then they picked the wrong guy, I said. She smiled faintly. Good, because we're not settling. We'll file an anti-slap motion to get this thrown out before trial, but we'll need to show everything you posted was true and of public concern. I pulled up my archive of videos, police records, and HOA documents. You mean proof I've got terabytes of it? Rachel grinned. Then let's bury them in facts. 2 weeks later, I walked into the Jefferson County Courthouse for the preliminary hearing. Valerie was already there, sitting at the plaintiff's table in a gray blazer, trying hard to look composed. Her hair was shorter now, her expression tighter, but the smugness hadn't faded. Greg sat beside her, hands clasped, eyes avoiding mine. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The courtroom buzzed with the low hum of anticipation, neighbors, reporters, and a few familiar faces from the HOA. Valerie's attorney, a man named Stanford Pierce, began with a rehearsed speech about public humiliation, viral defamation, and emotional cruelty. He spoke like he was pitching a drama to Netflix. Then Rachel stood, calm, precise, surgical. Your Honor, she said the plaintiff was arrested for making a false 911 call, trespassing, and attempted property damage, all documented on video. The defendant's posts were factual, not defamatory. Furthermore, the plaintiff's own public position as HOA president makes her actions a matter of community concern. This case isn't about reputation, it's about revenge. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do you have exhibits to support your motion? Rachel gestured, and I handed over a neatly labeled USB drive. Inside were clips, Valerie screaming at officers trying to pull my car door and calling 911 with fake tears. Watching her squirm as her own words echoed through the courtroom was a strange kind of justice. When the lights came back on, the judge cleared his throat. Miss Monroe, this evidence seems quite clear. Pierce stammered, Your Honor, that video lacks context, the judge interrupted. It seems to show the context rather thoroughly. The audience snickered. Valerie's face flushed red. After a brief recess, the judge ruled in our favor. The anti-slap motion was granted, the lawsuit dismissed with prejudice, and Valerie ordered to pay my legal fees. It was over in less than 2 hours. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed microphones out, questions flying. I gave one short statement. I didn't win anything today. The truth did. But even victory has an aftershock. When the local news ran the story that night, former HOA president loses $150 Kelvin's lawsuit over viral Lamborghini dispute, the video spread again. By the weekend, over 4 million people had watched it. The comments were brutal. HOA Karen strikes again. Imagine suing the guy after calling 911 on him first. This woman needs a new hobby. Within days, Valerie's name became a meme template. And that, ironically, was when Greg came knocking again. He looked tired, older, his confidence gone. Ethan, he began softly, please make it stop. The online attention, the photos, the jokes. Valerie's barely eating. She's broken. I folded my arms. She tried to destroy me. Then she dragged me to court. He nodded miserably. I know, and I can't defend her. But maybe you could take down the posts. The internet never forgets. I sighed. Greg, I don't control the internet. Even if I deleted my videos, they're everywhere now. You should have thought about that before calling 911 over a car. For the first time, he didn't argue. He just nodded, muttered a thank you, and walked away. It was the last time I ever saw him. In the months that followed, I poured my focus back into rebuilding the HOA. We installed body cameras for compliance officers, added a digital portal for dispute mediation, and introduced a homeowner bill of rights. Ironically, the scandal made Lakeside Meadows a kind of internet legend. Journalists called us the HOA that turned itself around. People from other states emailed asking for copies of our new bylaws. And yes, membership applications tripled. People actually wanted to live here now. One afternoon, I was finishing paperwork at my dining table when a knock came at the door. It was Officer Dana Ruiz, the same officer who had tackled Valerie months earlier. President Cole, she greeted with a small smile. Heard the good news. Case closed, clean slate. Couldn't have done it without your footage, I said. She grinned. We still show that clip at training. How to handle HOA emergencies without losing your sanity. We shared a laugh. Then she glanced past me into the garage. Is that the famous Lamborghini? I nodded. Still spotless. You ever thought about trading it in? She teased. After everything that car's been through, I said. Never. That evening, I drove the Urus through the winding mountain roads just outside Cedar Grove. The sunset hit the metallic gold just right, and for the first time in a long time, I felt weightless. I thought about how one ridiculous $1 offer had changed everything, my neighborhood, my reputation, even my sense of justice. As I crested the ridge overlooking the valley, my phone buzzed with a notification. The HOA group chat was active again. Someone had posted a meme, a picture of a Lamborghini under police lights with the caption, "When HOA Karen tries to fine you but you have receipts." I laughed so hard I nearly missed my turn. When I got home, I parked the Urus, carefully stepped out, and just stood there under the porch light staring at the car. That's when I realized something. I used to think of the Urus as a trophy, a symbol of success. But now it was something else. It was proof that no amount of false power, gossip, or arrogance could erase truth. The sound of tires crunching on gravel pulled me from my thoughts. It was Lucas again walking his dog. Another quiet night in paradise, he joked. For once, I said. He grinned. You know, you might be the only HOA president in history who became a local hero instead of a villain. I smiled. Give it time. Someone will find a reason to hate me eventually. Lucas laughed and waved as he continued down the street. I looked back at my Lamborghini, its golden reflection glowing in the garage light. And for the first time since this all began, I didn't see conflict. I saw balance. The HOA had learned humility. The neighborhood had learned unity. And I had learned that standing your ground even against a full-blown Karen armed with a clipboard could spark real change. Because sometimes, peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from refusing to sell your soul or your car for one single dollar. 6 months passed after the lawsuit, and life in Lakeside Meadows had finally reached something resembling peace. The lawns were trimmed, the sidewalks were quiet, and no one was getting ambushed with surprise fines taped to their doors at midnight. For the first time in years, people were actually proud to say they lived here. Under my leadership, the HOA had become what it was meant to be: a support system, not a weapon. We built a community garden, replaced the useless monthly compliance patrol with neighborhood BBQs, and created an online portal where residents could vote on decisions. Transparency wasn't just a buzzword anymore, it was policy. And then, right when everything was running smoothly, an official-looking white envelope arrived. It was stamped with the seal of the Colorado Department of Community Associations, an audit notice. Apparently, the state had decided to conduct a routine financial and ethical review of our HOA due to recent public exposure and leadership changes. Translation: all the drama with Valerie and the viral video had caught the attention of the state regulators. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. Of course, I muttered. Can't have 6 months of peace. When I brought it up at the next board meeting, the room filled with uneasy murmurs. Mark Ellison, our vice president, looked at me over his reading glasses. It's probably standard procedure. We're clean. Right should be, I said. But we inherited years of records from Valerie. And if there's one thing I know, it's that she never did anything by the book. Everyone went silent. The auditors arrived the following Monday, 2 people in suits carrying clipboards and tablets. Mr. Blake, a tall man with a dry sense of humor, introduced himself with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His partner, Miss Nguyen, looked like she could spot a forged receipt from across the room. They set up in the HOA office and began combing through every record from the past 5 years. Contracts, budgets, violation fees, landscaping invoices, it all went under the microscope. By the 3rd day, Blake called me in. "Mr. Cole," he said, gesturing to a stack of files. Do you have any idea why your HOA paid nearly $40,000 to a company called Greencrest Maintenance LLC last year? Sure, I said. That's the lawn service Valerie used before I took office. Why? He turned his tablet toward me. Because Greencrest doesn't exist. It's a shell company. Its registered address leads to a P.O. box, and its listed contact, A.G. Monroe. I blinked. Greg Monroe, Valerie's husband. Miss Wynne nodded, tapping her pen. It appears the previous board president authorized multiple payments to her husband's company for services that were never performed. That's embezzlement. For a moment I was speechless. I had expected incompetence, not outright theft. How bad is it? I asked quietly. Preliminary estimate around $87,000 misappropriated over 3 years, Blake said. We'll have to refer this to the Attorney General's office. I sat there staring at the numbers, anger simmering under my calm. The Monroes weren't just power-hungry, they had turned the HOA into their personal ATM. That night I called Rachel, my attorney, again. When I told her what the auditors found, she didn't even sound surprised. I had a feeling there was more under the surface, she said. You're doing the right thing, cooperating. But brace yourself. When this hits the news, the Monroes will come crawling out of hiding. She was right. 2 days later, Greg Monroe showed up at the HOA office. He looked thinner, almost desperate. Ethan, we need to talk, he said, glancing nervously at the auditors through the glass window. I crossed my arms. About what? The fake lawn company or the missing 87 grand, he winced. Look, I didn't know Valerie was still moving that money after the lawsuit. She told me she'd stopped. You signed the checks, Greg, I said flatly. I just trusted my wife, he snapped, then lowered his voice. She's not well. You know that. She thought she could borrow from the HOA to pay off her legal fees, then put it back later. Except she never did, I said. He swallowed hard. If this goes criminal, she's finished. Please, Ethan. Talk to the auditors. Tell them she's been through enough. You don't have to ruin her life. I stared at him for a long moment. She ruined her own life, Greg. The rest of us are just cleaning up the mess. He left without another word. By the following week, the audit was complete, and the results were brutal. Over $87,000 misused multiple violations of nonprofit governance laws and falsified maintenance reports. The HOA's reputation, ironically, was cleaner than ever, but its past had been exposed like a wound. The Attorney General's office opened an investigation, and subpoenas went out to the Monroes. The day the news broke, the headlines spread across every local station: former HOA president and husband under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. My phone lit up nonstop. Neighbors sent messages of shock relief, even apology. One said, I can't believe she was scamming us the whole time. Another wrote, guess that explains why our landscaping never got done. But one message stood out. It was from Brandon Monroe, their son. Mr. Cole, I just wanted to say thank you for doing what's right. My parents needed to be stopped. I'm sorry for what happened back then. I stared at that message for a long while before replying. You don't have to apologize, Brandon. Sometimes telling the truth hurts people, but it saves others. The following month, Valerie finally resurfaced in court. The footage from the audit hearings later circulated online, but I'll never forget seeing her walk in that morning. Gone was the confident woman in pink blazers and pearls. She wore a plain gray suit, hair tied back, eyes hollow. The prosecutor laid out the evidence with clinical precision: falsified HOA contracts, illegal payments, altered bank records. Greg sat beside her, pale and defeated. When it came time for Valerie to speak, she didn't argue. She just said, I thought I was helping. I didn't know how deep I'd gone. The judge didn't buy it. She was sentenced to 18 months of probation, community service, and restitution. Every dollar she'd taken had to be paid back to the association. Greg got 6 months probation and a hefty fine. It wasn't prison, but it was justice. When it was over, I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Colorado sunlight and felt something I hadn't felt since the day the sirens first wailed down my street closure. Back in Lakeside Meadows, the residents voted to rename the community clubhouse after the new spirit of accountability. They called it the Fairway. We framed the final audit report in the lobby, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what happens when people stop paying attention. At the dedication ceremony, Lucas nudged me and whispered, "Never thought we'd celebrate an HOA audit." I laughed. "Welcome to 2025, my friend." Even Officer Ruiz attended, standing by the buffet table, sipping lemonade. "Hard to believe this all started with a $1 offer," she said. "Yeah," I replied, smiling at the memory. "The most expensive dollar in Colorado history." She chuckled. "And one of the loudest." That night, after everyone went home, I walked out to my driveway and looked at my Lamborghini Urus, its golden paint glinting under the streetlights. So much had changed people policies, the entire community, and yet the car stood exactly as it always had, untouchable, unapologetic, a silent witness to everything. I ran my hand along the hood and whispered, half to myself, half to the car. We made it, didn't we? The engine clicked softly as it cooled in the summer air like it was answering me. For the first time, I didn't feel like the guy with the fancy car that made everyone jealous. I felt like a man who had earned peace the hard way. And in a neighborhood once ruled by fear that was worth more than any luxury vehicle could ever buy. Because sometimes the real engine of change isn't horsepower, it's honesty. And honesty, I'd learned, can take you farther than any Lamborghini ever could. By early summer, life in Lakeside Meadows had reached a golden rhythm. The lawns were green, the residents were friendly, and for once, HOA meeting didn't mean an argument. It meant free coffee, honest debate, and maybe a raffle for a gas gift card. The drama that had once defined our neighborhood felt like a distant nightmare. Valerie and Greg were long gone, paying back their restitution from a small rental house across town. The new board ran efficiently, the audits were clean, and the HOA had become something of a model association across Colorado. We even started getting invitations to speak at other HOAs about our reforms. That part made me laugh. I was just a guy who wanted to wash his Lamborghini without being harassed, and now I was apparently a community management success story. It was peaceful, too peaceful. And if I've learned anything about HOA life, it's that peace never lasts long. It started with a drone, a brand new buzzing piece of technology that appeared over my driveway one bright Saturday morning while I was waxing the Lamborghini Urus. The metallic gold paint reflected the sun like liquid fire, and for a moment I thought maybe a neighbor was just admiring it from above. But then the drone dipped lower, far too low. It hovered barely 15 feet over my garage roof, spinning and tilting like it was trying to get a closer shot. "Hey," I shouted. "Who's flying that thing?" No answer. I tried to ignore it, but the buzzing followed me around the car, over the driveway, even toward the backyard. Finally, I grabbed my phone and started recording. "If you're filming me, you'd better identify yourself." A minute later, the drone zipped away toward the park across the street. I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to 200 new notifications on my phone. Someone had uploaded a video titled "HOA President Shows Off His $300 Kelvin's Lamborghini While Finding Neighbors for Grass Height." The clip showed aerial footage of me cleaning the Urus, spliced with dramatic music and fake HOA complaint screenshots. The video description accused me of hypocrisy, corruption, and embezzling HOA fees to buy a supercar. It had 4,000,000 views overnight. I sat there staring at the screen, jaw tight. Unbelievable. By noon it hit 100,000. By the next day, 500,000. And the comment section, a war zone. Typical HOA tyrant rich guy milking the neighborhood. That's the Karen who called 911 all over again, just male edition, so he wasn't the hero. Wow, guess we got duped. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Journalists were calling again. Even R, divided by Hohel, had revived the thread, debating whether I'd become the villain this time. Lucas came by that evening, shaking his head. "Man, they're eating you alive online." "Yeah," I muttered, scrolling through the video. "And none of this is true. Who posted it? Channel names, Neighborhood Watchdog." I zoomed in on the profile picture, a blurry image of a cul-de-sac at sunset. The description read, "Exposing corruption in suburban America." Lucas frowned. "Smells like a smear campaign." I nodded slowly, and I think I know who's behind it. 3 days later, my suspicion was confirmed. The HOA's community email account got an anonymous tip, a copy of a digital receipt showing a new drone purchase under the name Gregory Monroe. It didn't take a detective to piece it together. Greg was furious about the audit exposure and Valerie's conviction, and now he was trying to rewrite the story to make me the villain instead. I met with Rachel, my attorney, again. Defamation, harassment, invasion of privacy. "We've got him dead to rights," she said. "But if we go after him legally, it's just going to blow up bigger online. So what do you suggest?" She leaned back. "Fight fire with sunlight. You've got receipts. Show them." I thought about it for a long time. I didn't want another viral circus, but letting lies spread felt worse. So reluctantly, I sat down at my desk that night and hit record. The video I posted was simple. No flashy edits, no dramatic music, just me sitting in front of my garage with the golden Lamborghini behind me. "Hi everyone," I began. "My name's Ethan Cole. I'm the president of the Lakeside Meadows HOA, the same one you've probably seen in that viral video accusing me of corruption. I'd like to set the record straight." I explained everything. The false 911 call, the lawsuit, the audit, the reforms. The proof that my company had existed long before I ever joined the HOA. I showed the audit report, Valerie's conviction notice, and the HOA's new open budget system. Everything I own, I said, was earned through 15 years of work in cybersecurity. I don't take a dollar from HOA funds. Every resident here has access to our accounts. Go look for yourself. I ended the video with one sentence that I didn't plan. It just came out. I didn't buy a Lamborghini to show off. I bought it to remind myself that integrity is the only luxury worth keeping. Then I clicked upload. Within 24 hours, it hit 1 million views. By day 3, mainstream outlets had picked it up again. This time, though, the tone had changed. HOA president fires back at viral smear with proof. Drone video exposed as fake former HOA treasurer implicated. From villain to victor, how Ethan Cole turned HOA hell into redemption. And the comments, a total 180. This guy handled it with class. That speech should be in a leadership seminar. He didn't even raise his voice once. Respect. Greg Monroe tried to deny involvement, of course, but when the local police traced the drone registration back to his name and found the raw footage on his computer, the lie collapsed completely. He was fined for harassment and violating privacy laws. Valerie, still under probation, had no choice but to issue a written apology as part of her plea deal. The internet, however, had already decided the verdict. For once, I wasn't the target, I was the proof that decency still existed online. That fall, Lakeside Meadows became a viral sensation again, but this time for the right reasons. The HOA received a state award for community reform, and I was invited to speak at the Colorado Association of Homeowners Conference in Denver. I almost declined, but Lucas convinced me. You've survived the worst of HOA drama. You might as well teach people how not to end up like us. So there I was, standing on stage in front of 200 HOA board members, a slideshow of our neighborhood glowing behind me. I used to think HOA problems came from bad rules, I told them. But the truth is, they come from bad people using good rules to control others. Change the people, and you change everything. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. For the first time, the letters HOA didn't feel like a curse word. A week later, I came home late from the office, parked the Urus in my driveway, and looked around the quiet street. Kids' bikes lay on the lawns. Porch lights glowed softly. Somewhere a neighbor was grilling. Peace. Real peace. I leaned against the car, remembering how it all began, with one entitled woman, one ridiculous offer, and one desperate call to 911. Now, standing in the same spot where those flashing lights had once blinded me, I felt only calm. Lucas walked by with his dog raising his hand. "Hey, President Cole, what's next for the famous Lakeside Meadows?" I smiled. "Hopefully nothing newsworthy." He laughed. "No promises." Later that night, I scrolled through the HOA's group page and saw a new post from a resident. "To our HOA president, thank you for standing your ground. You didn't just clean up a neighborhood, you rebuilt a community." I shut off my phone and looked at the Lamborghini one last time before heading inside. It wasn't a trophy anymore. It was a symbol of what happens when you refuse to back down even when the world turns its camera on you. In the end, the lesson was simple but hard-earned. In a world full of noise, integrity speaks the loudest. And sometimes all it takes to silence the chaos is one man, his car, and the courage to tell the truth. Winter rolled into Cedar Grove with crisp mornings and quiet evenings, the kind that made even the HOA board slow down. After the chaos of the viral storm, I'd started to think, maybe, just maybe, Lakeside Meadows had finally found its rhythm. The lawns were still green, the newsletters were still friendly, and nobody had filed a complaint about a car, a fence, or a trash can in nearly 4 months. It was almost eerie. That calm lasted until the annual HOA election season arrived. In most neighborhoods, these elections were boring, a few volunteers, a few signatures, a quiet night. But in Lakeside Meadows, every election had become something of a spectacle. The community center filled up with people holding coffee cups and whispered opinions while others showed up just for the free donuts. This year's ballot included 2 board seats, and to everyone's surprise, a new challenger had filed paperwork to run for HOA president against me. The name on the form made me blink twice. Mark Ellison, my vice president, my ally. The same man who'd helped me rewrite the bylaws, organize the audit, and lead reform. I sat in the boardroom staring at the nomination list in silence. Lucas broke it first. "Didn't he literally say last month he was too tired to even host the barbecue?" "Yeah," I said slowly, but apparently not too tired to run for my seat. At first I thought it was a misunderstanding. Maybe he wanted to step up in case I stepped down. But the next morning, the neighborhood Facebook group proved me wrong. Mark had posted a long message titled, "It's Time for Fresh Leadership in Lakeside Meadows." He wrote about the need for balance, about the dangers of ego, and about how certain individuals had used their positions to build personal brands instead of community unity. He didn't mention my name, but he didn't have to. Everyone knew who he meant. The comments flooded in. "Ethan's done a great job. Why change now? Mark's got a point, this HOA's too focused on one guy and his car. Let's not forget he made our neighborhood go viral twice." I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. Here we go again. That evening I knocked on Mark's door. He opened it with a cautious smile, clearly expecting the confrontation. "Ethan," he said, "I was hoping we could talk before this got awkward." "Too late for that," I said calmly. "You could have told me directly." He sighed. "It's not personal. You've done a lot of good. But people are starting to think Lakeside Meadows revolves around you. The videos, the interviews, the reputation, it's too much. So the solution is to push me out." He shook his head. "No, the solution is to remind people this community isn't a one-man show." I studied him for a long moment. Mark wasn't arrogant. He was practical, careful, thoughtful, and in his own way proud. Maybe he really believed what he was saying. "All right," I said finally. "You want a fair election, let's give them one." The campaign began quietly but quickly gained momentum. Flyers appeared in mailboxes, neighborhood debates popped up online, and before long, local news stations were calling again. Apparently, the HOA president versus the Reform ally made for good TV. I refused to do interviews this time. I didn't want to fuel another viral frenzy. Instead, I focused on my record publishing budget summaries, answering residents' questions directly, and reminding people of the progress we'd made. Mark, meanwhile, leaned into the fresh start message. He held casual meetups at the park, promising less media attention and more normalcy. The tone was civil, at least at first. But a few anonymous accounts on the HOA group page started stirring trouble again. Posts accused me of using HOA funds for YouTube promotions, or accepting sponsorships for public appearances. All lies. One evening, Lucas stormed into my kitchen waving his phone. "Whoever's behind these posts is feeding Mark's campaign. Maybe not Mark himself," I said, "but someone wants me off that board." And they were succeeding. Polls from our community site showed my support dropping from 80% to barely 55%. A week before the vote, the HOA hosted a candidate forum in the clubhouse. The place was packed, standing room only. The tension was thick enough to taste. The moderator, Mrs. Hanley from Unit 14B, adjusted her glasses and said, "Each candidate will have 5 minutes for an opening statement." Mark went first. He spoke smoothly, confidently. "Ethan Cole has done tremendous work cleaning up this HOA. But now we need stability. Less drama, less attention. It's time for Lakeside Meadows to be known for peace, not controversy." Polite applause followed. Then it was my turn. I stepped to the podium, hands clasped loosely, scanning the crowd. So many familiar faces, people who'd once stood by me during the chaos. I had to remind them why I fought in the first place. When I first moved here, I just wanted to live in peace. Instead, I ended up fighting lies, corruption, and intimidation. Not for attention, but because silence would have cost us our community. You all remember what this place used to feel like. Fear, division, one person's control over everyone else. We fought our way out of that together. Now Mark's right, we need calm. But calm doesn't come from forgetting the past. It comes from remembering why we changed. I'm not here to be famous. I'm here to make sure nobody ever calls 911 on a neighbor again for doing nothing wrong. The room was silent for a moment. Then the applause came loud, genuine, longer than I expected. I glanced at Mark, and he gave me a small nod of respect. Election day arrived with a chill in the air. Residents lined up outside the clubhouse, chatting, sipping coffee, casting votes on paper ballots for the first time in years. I stayed home washing the Urus like it was any other Saturday. Lucas came by halfway through, hands in his jacket pockets. "You nervous?" he asked. "Not really," I said. "If they want someone else, that's their right." He laughed. "You're lying through your teeth." I smiled. "Maybe a little." That evening the results were posted online. I waited until the site loaded fully before reading. Ethan Cole, 187 votes 60, et 1% Mark Ellison, 120 et un vote 39%. I sat back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. Luca texted me. A minute later, "Congrat, Mr. President, again. Drinks on me tonight." I typed back, "Make it lemonade." At the next meeting, I offered Mark my hand before anything else. "No hard feelings," I said. He shook it firmly. None. You won fair. And for what it's worth, I'm glad the HOA still trusts you. Then let's keep it that way, I said. We did. Over the next few months, we worked better together than before. Maybe the election cleared the air, or maybe we both just grew up a little. A few weeks later, during another calm Saturday morning, I was back where it all began. Driveway bucket of soap and a sunlit Lamborghini. Lucas walked by, coffee in hand. So, another year, huh? Still president. Still shiny car. Still no peace. I grinned. Hey, the HOA needs something to gossip about. He laughed. You ever think about stepping down someday, I said, rinsing the car? But not until I'm sure this neighborhood can survive without someone watching the watchers. The water reflected the Urus's golden paint and rippling light. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like a burden, it felt like armor. The sound of laughter and sprinklers filled the air, and I realized that maybe this was what victory really looked like. Not fame, not vindication, but a quiet neighborhood where no one lived in fear. And if they ever did again, I'd be ready. Because once you've survived a $1 Lamborghini war, HOA politics just don't scare you anymore. By the time spring rolled around again, I thought I'd seen it all. False 911 calls, lawsuits, audits, smear campaigns, Lakeside Meadows had been through every flavor of suburban chaos imaginable. But what I didn't realize was that the most dangerous battle wasn't going to come from outside the HOA, it was going to come from inside. After winning the election, I threw myself into finishing what we started: digitizing every remaining HOA record, updating the legal charter, and finalizing our new Community Rights Act, which protected homeowners from arbitrary fines. It was the kind of reform that could serve as a template for other neighborhoods across Colorado. And that apparently was the problem. The moment word got out that Lakeside Meadows might share our policies publicly, a few old guard HOA leaders from nearby communities started whispering. They claimed we were undermining the authority of local boards and setting a dangerous precedent. Within weeks, I received a polite but pointed letter from the regional HOA council inviting me to a review hearing to discuss recent actions and reforms. I'd learned enough by now to recognize when invitation really meant warning. The meeting was held in a downtown conference room filled with people in suits, the kind who could turn a discussion about mailbox paint colors into a Supreme Court case. The council's chairperson, Diane Holt, smiled thinly as I sat down. Mr. Cole, Lakeside Meadows has become quite the topic lately. Viral videos, legal victories, reforms. You've built quite a reputation. I'll take that as a compliment, I said. Her smile didn't move. Let's discuss your proposed Community Rights Act. You understand, of course, that distributing such a document to other associations without regional approval could be seen as interference. Interference, I repeated. I'm not forcing anyone to adopt it. I'm sharing what worked for us: transparency, accountability, and resident voting rights. A few council members shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat. Mr. Cole, these rules exist for a reason. Homeowners need structure. If every board started rewriting charters, we'd have anarchy. With respect, I said evenly, what you call structure, some of us call abuse of power. That earned me a few glares. Diane leaned forward, clasping her hands. We're simply asking you to withdraw the document from public circulation, quietly. We'll even recognize your HOA for community excellence if you comply. The classic bribe wrapped in a compliment. I smiled. Let me make sure I understand. You want me to bury the reforms that made our neighborhood functional in exchange for a plaque? Her tone sharpened. We're trying to protect the system, Mr. Cole. Maybe the system's what needs protection from people like you, I said. That did it. The room went cold. When I returned home that night, I knew retaliation was coming. Sure enough, 3 days later, Lakeside Meadows received an official inspection notice from the Regional Compliance Division, a surprise audit to assess adherence to statewide HOA protocols. Lucas read the letter out loud in my kitchen and burst out laughing. They really can't help themselves, can they? Nope, I said. They're scared. What do you want to do? I looked out the window toward the golden Lamborghini parked in the driveway, reflecting the evening light like a mirror. Same thing we've always done, play by the rules better than they do. The inspectors arrived on a Wednesday morning, armed with clipboards, badges, and attitudes. They combed through financial records, interviewed residents, and even checked the community garden for unauthorized modifications. But they found nothing, because this time we were ready. Every receipt, every vote, every decision was documented, time-stamped, and digitally archived. Still, one inspector, Mr. Harlan, seemed particularly determined to dig up something. He spent hours reviewing our landscaping contracts, and finally declared, "You paid $50 above market rate for mulch." That's an irregularity. I stared at him. $50. You drove 2 hours for that. He didn't laugh. It's a violation under subsection 9B, financial inconsistency. I couldn't help myself. Then charge me the 50 and call it even. By the end of the day, their final report came back, 0 major violations. I thought that would end it. Instead, it made them angrier. The next morning, Diane Holt herself showed up unannounced at my office. "Congratulations, Mr. Cole," she said with icy politeness. "You passed your inspection. But there's one last matter to discuss." She slid a folder across my desk. Inside was a formal petition for removal signed by 6 regional HOA leaders. They wanted me expelled from the council network and stripped of any ability to hold a board position in the future. "Let me guess," I said. "For being too effective, for being disruptive," she replied. "You've turned a local success story into a rebellion. People are questioning the purpose of the HOA model itself." "Maybe they should," I said quietly. She frowned. "You're playing a dangerous game." "No," I said, standing up. "I'm fixing one." Word of the petition spread fast. Within 48 hours, Lakeside Meadows residents flooded social media with posts defending me. Other HOA communities, dozens of them, started reaching out privately asking for copies of our charter. Then something unexpected happened. A local news station aired a short segment about the conflict, and it exploded online. The headline read, "HOA Council Attempts to Silence Reform Leader." Within days, the council's inbox was flooded with public backlash. Homeowners across the state demanded transparency. Some even started organizing reform votes to challenge their own HOA boards. And just like that, the power started shifting again, this time not just in Lakeside Meadows, but statewide. A month later, the council called an emergency summit in Denver to address misinformation. They invited me, probably expecting me to apologize. I didn't. Standing on that stage, looking out at a crowd of HOA leaders, lawyers, and homeowners, I said what everyone had been too afraid to say for years. HOAs were built to protect property values, not destroy peace of mind. They were meant to build communities, not police them. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that. The room was silent. Cameras flashed. I continued steady but firm. If accountability threatens your power, maybe that power shouldn't exist. I'm not against HOAs. I'm against tyranny with landscaping bylaws. That line hit like a thunderclap. Even some board members clapped. Diane looked furious, but she couldn't stop it. The tide had turned. After the summit, the governor's office announced a new statewide HOA transparency bill directly inspired by Lakeside Meadows reforms. Suddenly, I wasn't just an HOA president, I was a reluctant advocate for change. Reporters called me the man who tamed the HOA. It was ridiculous, but kind of funny. Lucas joked that I should run for office. I told him I'd rather wax cars for a living. On the 1-year anniversary of the $1 Lamborghini incident, our community held a small celebration. Neighbors brought food, kids ran through sprinklers, and someone even baked a cake shaped like the HOA logo with a tiny toy Urus parked beside it. As the sun set, I stood in my driveway with a lemonade in hand, watching families laugh, where there had once been shouting and fear. Lucas walked up beside me. "So you really did it," he said. "You turned an HOA into something people actually like." I smiled. "Didn't do it alone." He grinned. "Still, it started with you and that car." I looked at the golden Lamborghini under the fading light, its surface reflecting 100 shades of orange and red. It wasn't just metal and horsepower anymore, it was a symbol of resilience, of what happens when ordinary people refuse to bow to corruption, even in the smallest corners of suburban America. "You know," I said quietly, "she once offered me $1 for it." Lucas laughed. "Best rejection you ever made." I nodded, taking a slow sip of lemonade as the streetlights flickered on. Maybe the world would forget my name. Maybe another HOA somewhere would repeat our mistakes. But Lakeside Meadows, our little patch of suburban battleground, had proven something that no viral video or scandal could erase, that even the smallest voice can change the loudest system. And sometimes all it takes is one golden car, one stubborn homeowner, and a community brave enough to say, "Not this time."